84 years have passed since the abandonment of the Industrial Industries, the largest and most influential company on the island. They lost their audience and the demand for their products sank, leaving their business in bankruptcy. The TROFF Island was full of wonders. There was a place known to the locals as Lava Land, supposedly has been an active lava region for a very long time. The lake located to the east of the Northern Laboratory was a very popular attraction to the people, along with the expansive Morning Swamp that spreads throughout the entire central region of the island. Seemingly out of nowhere, the people noticed bright flashes in the sky. They were meteors caused by debris from the nearby planet Villian. Villian was being destroyed by an unknown race, at least according to the scientific studies. After the debris crashed over the island, the people investigated. Some meteors were full of plant life from the various biomes of Villian, but most notably, the meteors contained a substance. This substance was shown to be extremely hazardous and infectious, hence the namesake, the infection. The infection was spreading faster than anything that has been seen before. The place that had received the most infection was the abandoned Industrial Industries, now recognized as the Infected Industries. Much like the infected meteors from before, another object fell from the stars. This one was different though. It turned out to be a UFO. The ship crashed near a village just next to the Infected Industries. The UFO contained a species of robotic aliens from planet Villian. They explore and survey the island, most likely looking for refuge from their destroyed planet. The people of the island noticed this, and they start taking precautions. A place called Market Town was developed to provide a consistent source of food to the island, along with mining operations stationed at Misty Mountain to provide other resources. Though the mining operations were also to study the alien robots. There was an abnormally large alien robot that was dead at Misty Mountain, so the mining operations started to scientifically investigate the properties of the robots. Though, unbeknownst to anyone on the island, there was a small mansion located deep in the eastern woods of the island. This place was said to be abandoned for decades, but out of nowhere there was some construction for what seemed to be a launch pad. To counter the threat of the infection, the scientists developed an organization hosted at the Northern Laboratory named the Infection Research Facility, also known as the IRF. As the infection spreads rapidly, the people panic more. Research to develop the cure was in progress and had to be quick. Optimistically, a new city was built and located in the northwest, known as Tarragon Town. The place was the most populated area on the entire island, with more residents quickly moving in. The beloved lake besides the IRF was named into Urban Lake, with a massive bridge going over it to further bring attention to the lake. The mining and research operations on Misty Mountain were upgraded, with a runway for transportation of resources through aircraft. After surveying and drilling for materials, the alien robots collected enough materials to construct a section of the island to claim as their own. This place was called Xandromino. The people of the island refer to this race of alien robots as Xandromnians. As time passed, Xandromnians seemed to want more and more. Invading the island was just the beginning of what they had planned. The people wouldn't accept these aliens taking over their home. After spying on Xandromino, it was noticed that the Xandromnians were very familiar with the infection. They had created a machine capable of intaking the slimy substance of the infection and implanting it with an artificial brain chip to control them and use them as weapons. To counter the Xandromnian forces, Tarragon Town started development for a secret weapon of massive size. The strange mansion in the eastern woods continued to build something, expanding past the launch pad. They also started to make the base of what looked like to be a rocket of sorts. Whatever it is that the people at the mansion were planning to do, it's definitely kept secret from the rest of the people. The time had come. The Xandromnians and the infection slime beasts were released to attack Tarragon. Tarragon forces were released to fight back. The Terrabots were created from reverse engineering the dead Xandromnians, and thus looked almost identical to the Xandromino robots, other than their sky blue color. Terrabots were released to fight back, along with a massive secret weapon Tarragon was working on, called the Terratron. It was a massive version of the Terrabots, capable of major destruction against the Xandrominian forces. The battle started, and it went down just northwest of Zandromino. The fight went on brutally between the Terrabots and the Zandrominians. The infection beasts that were created were killed off one by one, until eventually they combined forces. They formed together all into one massive substance. The beast grew limbs and was just as tall as the Terratron. The Terratron and the massive infection beast fought and fought endlessly, with shards of metal from the Terratron being broken off as chunks of the infectious sludge were blown off of the massive infection monster. The monster suddenly wrapped itself around the Terratron, constricting it entirely. If the Terratron were to die, they would be taken over by this massive beast the Zandrominians created. Suddenly, the Terratron began beeping. It beeped faster and faster until it detonated. Terragon secretly put a self-destruct sequence inside of the robot, just in case it was in a situation such as what it was in currently. The explosion devastated the beast so severely that every brain chip inside the monster was completely broken. The monster had been defeated, and all the Zandrominian forces retreated back to Zandromino. Terragon had won for now, but only time would tell what would come next between the conflicts of Terragon and Zandromino. The Zandrominians had all retreated back to Zandromino, afraid to fight back again. The people were on edge from this, but eventually settled with the fact that Zandrominians were now surrendered and contained in the center of Morning Swamp. On a different note, there were little random shacks appearing across the island, all looking exactly the same. Some people would look inside them, but the doors were locked. The lava at Lavaland was oddly beginning to subside. As the development for the cure was getting closer and closer, other scientific breakthroughs were being discovered. In Misty Mountain, the people researched and discovered technology from reverse engineering the dead Zandrominians. They had built-in drills and pumps that would collect resources and infection sludge. They assumed they would transport this to facilities stationed in Zandromino, though the largest discovery they made was from researching the crashed UFO. This contained a special device that was capable of distorting the environment with high levels of energy to break open portals through space to other places, essentially allowing these spacecrafts to teleport around space. The scientists took the device for themselves and attempted to recreate their own spacecraft at the Misty Mountain Research Base to test the device with. They then started the construction for the Terragon Space Traveler. Suddenly, the people heard something off in the distance. The rocket that the secret mansion was working on lifted off. The people watched it rise into the sky with curiosity, but oddly enough, it seemed to stop rising. Then panic rose amongst the people. It wasn't a rocket, but rather a massive missile charging straight towards the island. As it got closer, though, people noticed it was heading towards the middle of the island, right over Zandromino. Then the missile struck. A shockwave was felt throughout the whole island. People went to look. Not a single Zandrominian was alive. The entire place was obliterated, leaving a crater larger than the size of Zandromino itself. The people had officially gotten rid of the Zandrominians, but who sent the missile? And were the people satisfied with this? The Zandrominians had surrendered, yet they were killed anyway. Unknown to the people, there was one last Zandrominian, heavily injured. This last one traveled far off to the mountain next to Market Town, and died. The IRF had done it. The cure was made, with tests being run until they were completely positive that it would work. The small shacks that appeared on the map previously then suddenly opened the top of their roof. Antenna-like towers peeked out and started transmitting the cure through energy waves in the nearby area. Once the cure waves struck the infection substance, they would dry up into a blue, shriveled stone. These cure shacks were placed strategically to cover all the areas that had the infection, so that not a single bit of the infection was left uncured. For the sake of scientific research, 2 meteor craters were isolated with a force field to contain the infection inside. After research was done, the infection zone force field would slowly shrink and shrink until the infection dies off. The first infection zone was labeled the Ripped Crater and was located southwestern part of the island. The second infection zone was labeled the Sinkhole and was located next to the mansion in the woods. The once infected Industries has now become the Cured Industries, with a massive crater of infected meteorites next to it becoming cured as well. Strangely, the dead remains from some Xandromanians had certain spectral forces rise above. These forces slowly made their way across the island until they reached the mountain next to the market town, the resting place of the last living Xandromanian. They all collectively gather around the Xandromanian's remains. Over by Misty Mountain, Tarragon's space traveler was completely ready for takeoff. The people would push their boundaries and explore further. The launch sequence commenced. The ship rocketed off into the sky before ripping through the space-time fabric to a different place. Everyone waited patiently for the ship to return, but it was taking longer than expected. Suddenly, the ship came back, bringing a vortex through space-time from where it returned. The ship first shot through the ground in the eastern part of the map, directly through one of the non-infected meteors from Voss. The vortex then began to shoot out things from its place of origin, including chunks from a mesa biome. The ship haphazardly flew around the map until it lost control once again, flying straight up into the sky before teleporting away once again. The people didn't have to wait much longer until the ship came back. It broke straight through the urban lake bridge, perfectly breaking through and creating another space-time vortex underneath the rubble. The ship started to distort the island they lived on. Structures from around the island started to teleport about nearby the vortexes. The land below the crashed UFO floated up and went towards the energy of the eastern vortex. Other structures did the same, like some of the farmland from Market Town and a random house. From the northern vortex, floating islands carrying a building from the Cured Industries, a rumbled ruin structure, and a house from Tarragontropolis all surrounded the vortex. The ship finally broke through the space-time one last time, but took longer to return than any of the other times. But just as the people were sure it was gone, it came back, bringing an entire floating desert with it. The vortex it left behind was in the southwestern portion of the island. The massive desert island that was brought along towered over everything, and was seemingly glitched to float above the ground just like the other floating islands around the vortexes. The ship was low on fuel, and broke through its last and shortest teleporting portal. It quickly came back and crashed near rumbled ruins, sadly killing off the crew of the ship in the process. This disaster was so terrible for Tarragon scientists' reputation, so the government cut their funding, and had to resort to fixing the matter themselves. Tarragon Town was completely upgraded, now known as Tarragontropolis, with new buildings constructed and others under construction. The clock tower, restaurant, and other large-scale buildings were all built in this process. One of these buildings, the Hospital of Tarragontropolis, had its upper floor closed off to the public, most likely due to contained renovations and constructions. The most important new building in Tarragon was Tarragon Tower. Known for being the largest and tallest structure in Tarragon, this tower contained large amounts of power for the city. Tarragon Tower was the symbol of the thriving city. The floating desert in the southwest was investigated. On top of the island was the other half of a house on the island that was teleported away, along with some cranes from the construction in Tarragontropolis. Most notably, there was an ancient alien village located there. The buildings had purple scriptures of some alien language. Translations were attempted, but failed. And the largest building was a room with its walls lined with skulls of alien species. Below the floating desert were odd, shadow-like tentacles. The species of shadow creatures that were under the shadow of the desert island seemed to have been carried over from where the desert came originally. The creatures never left from under the shadow of the floating island, even at night. Suspiciously, the mansion where the missile was launched from was nowhere to be seen, but nobody knew where it went. The Tarragon government took advantage of this. They went over to see where the mansion once was, investigating the area and getting more information behind who was running the operation with the missile against Andromeda. They found that the mansion had been abandoned for decades, only to be bought recently by a man named John Carter. They noticed that John had bought off the mansion to construct a sort of laboratory for his own personal use, discreet from the rest of the island. John had made a very modern underground lab and an interface installed, showing the blueprints for the missile along with his plans for destroying Andromeda. John Carter was known for his inventive mind and his fortune he made from selling his creations and weapons to the Tarragon government during the war against Andromedians. He was also known for helping design the Terrabots along with the Terratrons. John had been creating the missile to sell to Tarragon during the war. However, Tarragon ended up defeating Xandromino much sooner than he had anticipated, leaving the missile unneeded by Tarragon. John must have been desperate for more money, so sending the missile himself would potentially bring the war back again. The current whereabouts of John were completely unknown to the people on the island, but maybe it should be kept that way. The dead robot suddenly consumed all of the energy from the souls of the Xandrominians. The robot stood up with its creaking legs. A deep vibration rumbled from the Xandrominian, sending out some sort of signal. The robot's legs gave out as it crashed back to the ground. Suddenly, a fleet of Xandrominian ships flew down. The people panicked, and the Tarragon government prepared. Following the fleet of Xandrominian ships led many other ships of massive and varying sizes. The largest one was the mothership, storing immense amounts of energy. The Xandrominian Empire was called by the last remaining Xandrominian in a desperate attempt for revenge. They unleashed destruction where they hovered, destroying Market Town in the process, replacing the region into two areas. The northern area replacing Market Town being Xandrania, and the southern area becoming Xandranio. With the whole island at stake, Tarragon had to resort to desperate measures. The only way to take out both regions of Xandrania and Xandranio was to destroy them the same way they were destroyed the first time: a missile. Tarragon officials didn't have time to waste, so building a missile large enough to suffice would take too long. They resorted to constructing rockets onto the sides of Tarragon Tower, the tallest and grandest tower in all of Tarragon. Since this tower brought energy to the city, it would have enough energy to take out the Xandrominians once and for all. The time had come. Tarragon Tower was now rigged to become a weapon of utter destruction. They launched the tower straight for the Xandrominian territory. The bomb struck the Xandrominians, instantly killing them and their entire empire. Tarragon was left powerless, and the island was finally without war. From space, a massive purple mothership descended. The ship slowed and then hovered above robot reminiscences. Floating robots dispersed from the ship, carrying a massive battery towards Tarragon-tropolis. The robots dropped the battery in place where Tarragon Tower launched, and attached wires to support power for Tarragon. The people were thankful, but it seemed that the robots were even more thankful. They introduced themselves as the Zaders. They had been running from Xandrominians and now could live in peace knowing that they were finally gone. To show their gratitude, the Zaders delivered more than just the battery powering Tarragon. They delivered 5 floating purple structures across the island, one spherical one over the northern laboratory, a raindrop-shaped one at Rumbled Ruins, a diamond-shaped one at Misty Mountains, a square-like shape in the southeast next to Dusty Desert in the Vortex, and a final glowing one right under the Zader mothership. All of the structures radiated energy across where they hovered, providing an equal amount of energy across the island. These structures now enabled the island with indefinite energy. They would never need to generate any energy again. Any electrical device simply needed to have an attachment to it, and it would absorb the energy waves from the nearest structure. To celebrate and take advantage of this newfound energy source, the island constructed Smooth Stone City in the southeast with the help of Zader robots during the construction. A laboratory was built around the square-like purple structure there to study Zader technology, along with lots of residential housing within the city. The hospital in Tarragon-tropolis was acting strange. Rockets, much like those installed onto the Tarragon Tower, were being constructed and attached to the sides of the hospital. Something extremely odd was happening with the top floor. Something much more than just renovations and additional construction. The island was in the best state it has ever been in. Cities were booming and the people were thriving. But randomly, the Zaders returned back to their mothership, dropping everything they were doing. Once all of them went back, the ship took off into the sky. The people were confused. They had finally become safe and left? Suddenly, the floating purple structure shook and stabilized. They all collectively floated down into the ground, melting whatever stood in their way. The structures didn't stop and continued to dive slowly and shallowly into the ground below. The rockets on the side of the hospital sparked, and the hospital launched, going far off into the sky. The Tarragon government tried to investigate the hospital before this, but were completely unable to. But the mystery of the hospital was the least of their concerns. The people did everything in their power to stop the structures from what they were about to do. Many gave up, others kept striving. There was just no time left. The purple structures stopped diving into the ground. Each of them rested about 15 to 20 feet deep into the ground below. Then, they all shut off, leaving silence before the end of the island. They detonated. The structures that once provided eternal energy to the island became the very end of the people. Each and every person was killed in the detonation process of each purple structure. The spherical one above the northern laboratory exploded, unleashing a swarm of micro-drones. The drones flew over the northern area of the island, connecting together and completely blocking the area of any light. The drones then sprayed a shadow-like sludge down on the land, smothered with darkness. The sludge from all over would combine into shadow creatures, exactly like those from Under Dusty Desert. The shadow creature ripped apart the land and killed every last person that resided there. The raindrop-shaped purple structure above the rumbled ruins exploded, ironically dousing the area with lava once again. Lava geysers shot from under the ground in the area, building lava pools around. The diamond-shaped one exploded, freezing the surrounding area completely. Spikes of ice formed and frigid snow smothered the ground. The square-like one exploded, distorting the gravity of the region. All debris from the explosion floated and scattered nearby. Finally, the one in the center of the island blew up, causing the largest explosion out of the rest. The shockwave from this one instantly killed every living thing, or what was left still living. The shockwave broke apart the ground in several directions, connecting the craters from all other Zader bombs. The people of Villian were dead. The Zaders believed species that were nearing to be as advanced as them could perceive a threat to their rule in the future. Their solution to this was simple: never let those species get to that point. By finding them early enough, they could execute them with ease. Zaders never were the ones running from the Xandromanians, but rather the Xandromanians were the ones running from the Zaders. The hospital that launched off was now floating through space. On the upper floor resided the mansion from the Eastern Woods, along with the mastermind himself, John Carter. John was the lead of the Tarragon space traveler operation. His plan was to test out the teleportation device within the UFO to his own advantage. The best way to do this was to see if the device was capable of preserving humans through its teleportation process, and if the portals opened could be controlled and placed far with coordinates. Both of these would be tested through the Tarragon space traveler. To take extra precautions, John couldn't let the operation be successful. If it ended in success, then Tarragon would use it to their advantage. John rigged the Tarragon space traveler to lose control with a mere click of a button at his hand. When the testing had initiated, the Tarragon space traveler broke through its first portal, testing both if humans survived through the teleportation process and if the teleportation could be controlled to far distances. Fortunately, the portal opened up exactly where the coordinates were set and the crew survived without a scratch. John knew it had to be done, so he initiated the plan. The Tarragon space traveler then lost control, teleporting at random and eventually resulting in the death of the crew. Just as John wanted, the Tarragon government cut off the operation completely, leaving him to have the teleportation device just to himself. John then went to the next step of his plan, to install it where nobody would expect, right under their noses. He teleported the mansion into the upper section of the hospital in Tarragon, and constructed the perfect shuttle for space travel to escape from the destructive and inevitable fate that the island was set towards. Now floating through space, the hospital was calculating and searching for a civilization much like the one on his home planet Villian, while John would cryogenically freeze himself. His search continues for years until the perfect place is found.